So in the piece of code we have here, we are adding to the even DT and DD elements a inline CSS style of the background color CCC, right? And then when we look at this actual document live in Dreamweaver rather, Firefox with Firebug, we see that, hey, look what it did to our code. It popped in some styles right in there, right? Inline styles, embedded CSS styles, which, come on, we don't need that. That's garbage right there. That's bad practice, so we have to come out with a different solution. Well, how about this? How would we do this without JavaScript? Well, what we could do is go to every other DT and DD element, add a separate class, and then define a style in that class, and it'll appear, right? Well, guess what? jQuery has its own addClass function, and you know, that'd be the better way to do it, because then it's just going to add that class to our document. We'll make an external style sheet, and in that external style sheet we'll do the styling, and hey, we're money. So let's do just that. So to start off, we don't have to deviate too much from this original line of code we have here. Essentially, since this we know is targeting the elements that we want, it's not this part that we want to change, it's just the second half that we want to change. And we're always going to have this semicolon over here. So the CSS the jQuery function that's going to do this is .addClass. Notice the camel case. Now this is what's known as camel case, right? Because these are two separate words, addClass, but we put them together and we capitalize the second word. So this is obviously jQuery's syntax and the way it likes to do it. So, and that's obviously, we got to keep that in order for it to work. So similar to what we had before, we add our function, and now we actually have to say what our function is going to do. So we put a parenthesis, we put a single quote, and now we're actually going to say what class it has to add. Now at this point, that class doesn't have to exist anywhere. Just jQuery is just going to make it up and just add the class to the DT and DD elements that are even. So let me, I don't know, I'll name it even, or even rows. There we go. That's better. Even rows. Now obviously this even rows is encapsulated inside of single quotes, and those are inside of parentheses. And going back on my code, okay, I got the green light. There's no syntax errors. I'm going to save it. Let me go back to my browser. I'll give it a reload. Everything's gone, but now let me double check in Firebug. Okay, check that out. So if I look at this right here, I see that the first set of DT and DD have the class even rows. The next one does not. This one has the first class, the second one does not. Okay, pretty cool. So what's next? Well, now we actually have to attach a style sheet to this thing that defines a look for even rows. So let's do just that. Let's go back to our HTML, and inside of there we're going to link to an external style sheet. Actually, let me just, instead of me typing this one out manually, I'm gonna let Dreamweaver do all the heavy lifting for me. So I'm gonna add a new class, and what did I call it? Even rows. And yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's going to be a class. And where do I want this to be? Well, I don't want this just in this document. I want a new document, right? So let me get this going. Don't want it in my scripts folder. I'm going to put it in another folder called CSS, and then I'll name it style.css, and there we go. And now what do I want? Well, I just want to change the background color, and I'll change it to the gray that I had, the CCC, and I'll apply it. Hit OK, and let me save it. Actually, let me save this, the even row. Let me double check. Okay, now look, what Dreamweaver didn't do for me by default, at least, is it didn't add a media type to my style, and that's bad, because if I ever want to separate this from print or the projector or anything like that, I need to define a media type that this is for. So for this one, I'm going to do media type, and I'm just going to have it be screen, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So you know what, this media type is an important thing. Don't forget this, because otherwise sometimes you want something to print out differently than it is on the screen. If you don't define this and then you attach another printer CSS document, a lot of browsers, including the latest version of Firefox, I think, which is like 3.6, it actually still defaults to whatever, because if you don't put in the media type, it assumes that it's media all. That's kind of the default, so it'll completely ignore your printer style. So now let's see what this looks like. Boom. All right, we're back to where we were at before when we added the CSS. Aesthetically we are, but we're actually in a lot better situation, because if we look, we're still doing our standards thing, making sure that we're implementing best practices and keeping our CSS and our HTML separate, and it's all good. Yeah, this is very good, and that is exactly how you use this jQuery addClass function. And again, instead of using that CSS function, which that CSS function, by the way, is totally cool to use when you're just trying to test things and target things. But when it comes down to, it's showtime and you want to implement the look you're going for, make sure you do it with the addClass instead.